So my name's Heidi Setty. I'm the executive director at Oakmont of Fresno, assisted living community. We have assisted living and memory care. And I've been here over 2 years. And I've been in the industry over 30. Honestly, back in 1989, before you were probably born, I was living in Santa Barbara. And I didn't have a car, and right across the street from my apartment was a nursing home. And they needed a Medi-Cal biller. So I just walked over there, got the job, and then that kind of led to my career in healthcare. At that time, I was still in college. So I had changed my major like 10 times at that point. And so I found out, well, this is what I love. And so you kind of fall into, like life happens, and you kind of fall into it. And then I found that I really found a calling. No one goes into this kind of work to get rich. You don't. You go into it because you get more from it than money. You get a satisfaction. You get the joy of helping people in their time of need, especially our residents and their families. A lot of times the families are the one that need you more than the residents do. And so just being able to be there for them and give them what they need. So actually it was in 1999. My father passed away in June. And my mom really depended on him a lot, and we didn't know how bad it was until he passed. And then I saw she could not get through a day without me telling her what to do. And so it was just a progressive decline at that point. So I took her to her doctor. He did what's called a mini mental on her, and she had what's called mild cognitive impairment at that point, but it was leading to dementia, Alzheimer's. A few years after that she had, she could not live on her own. So she moved in with my sister, who was a stay-at-home mom at that point. And she would live with my sister during the week, and on weekends I would take her. And it got to the point where she was dangerous. And so she could get up in the middle of the night and turn on the stove and forget that she did that. Or she tried to get out the door a few times. So my sister had to alarm her whole house. And it just got too dangerous to leave her at home. So then we found a place for her, and she lived out the rest of her life in a community, which was actually only a few years, because then she ended up passing. I was already in the industry at that point, so I knew what was coming. So I knew there was going to be a point where she was not going to recognize us. And so I was braced for that. Luckily, it never happened. She never lost her family. She never forgot us. Where a lot of people forget their children, she never did. But she forgot my daughter, and she forgot all her friends that she had friends for 50, 60 years. She could not remember them. But she remembered me, and she remembered my sister, which was a blessing to us. But she lost who she was. She used to be so, I don't want to say joyful, but she was just a person full of life. I mean, she came here to America. She was an immigrant. She came over here right after World War II as a Japanese American. So think about that. She was Japanese. She immigrated to America right after World War II. And it was not a great situation. She encountered so much prejudice and hate, but she never let it affect her. She was never a hateful person. I would get mad as a little child. I remember people being so hateful to her, and she would just tell me that we had to forgive them for that because they were just ignorant. They didn't know. And so she never held hate in. She never had that feeling. She always loved people. And she said, we get what we put out. So if we put out love, it will come back to us. So that's just who she was. And she was someone that was always in the garden. She was a master gardener. So our gardens at our house were amazing. But she lost all that. She didn't want to garden anymore. She loved to cook. She was a scratch cook who could go to a restaurant, eat the food, taste it, and then come home and recreate it. But she didn't want to cook anymore. She lost all of the things that brought her joy. Let's see, growing up with them, there were 4 of us, so I was the youngest of 4 children. And I was like the after child. So all the others were much older than me, 8, 7, 6 years older than me. So I was like her protector. So I grew up protecting my mom and being her interpreter, because she didn't speak English very well. I thought it was fine. So I had no problem with it. But other people couldn't understand her. And so wherever she went, even as a little child, I would go with her, and I would, we were always together. And just so many memories of just being with her, we used to love just the two of us to go to movies together. And my favorite memory is my mom was an avid reader. And so was I as a little child. And we discovered that the downtown Fresno library, they had this whole section of Japanese novels. And so once a week we would go, and she would get her book and I would get my book. And then we would go home and read them. And the next week we would go back and we would get a different book. And we did that all through high school. Every week. We must have read that whole library. They also had Japanese videos there. And so Japanese, there was before cable, right? And so we would go and get Japanese videos, and I would watch them with her. And she would explain to me what they were saying, because they didn't have subtitles back then. So those were some really great memories. And then she was, like I said, she was a great cook. She was a scratch cook, could learn how to make anything just by tasting it. And so just all the recipes she would try out on me, and we would taste them together. So to this day, I love food a lot. And it's from her. I don't cook, but my joy, those kinds of joyful things are from my mom. Like my joy of reading, and my joy of food, and my joy of exploring places. She liked to go to new places. My dad was very much a homebody. He didn't want to go anywhere, but my mom and I liked to explore. So we would go out and we would go do things together. We would go to San Francisco together, or we used to go shopping at Gilroy together, and those kinds of things. And so those memories are very special. And I passed those on to my daughter. So every year, my daughter and I, when she was young, we would go to Gilroy and do all her school shopping. And that kind of comes from my mom. So my mom was in a facility. She was actually in a nursing facility because she ended up getting cancer too. And she had it before, and we fought it. And this time around, she was in the stage of Alzheimer's where she kind of still knew what was going on, but didn't. But my sister and I asked her, do you want to seek treatment? And she said no. The last time it was awful. The radiation and stuff, and the chemo just was not a good quality of life. And she says, no, I don't want to do that. I just want to be happy. And so we didn't seek treatment. And so we chose to put her on hospice care. And so we put her on hospice care, and they were a big support. And my one directive to hospice is make sure she's not in pain. And they did a great job of that. They made sure she wasn't in pain, and she passed very comfortably on hospice services. Working in the industry, I guess, you know about it, but when it's your own family, it's hard. And so I remember I was at work, and the director from the hospice company, they actually worked in the same building as I did. And she came over to me and she pulled me out of the meeting I was in and said, your mom is passing. And so I jumped in my car and I drove over there, and I was able to be with her in the last seconds of her life. But unfortunately, my sister wasn't. And I had to call my sister and tell her, and that was harder than anything. So I called her husband and I said, is April, my sister's name is April, in a safe place and away from her kids, because her kids were young at the time. And he pulled her into the bedroom, and I told her. And so that was difficult. But at the end of the day, she didn't suffer. And so that's all we could hope for. If anyone ever if they have someone that has a terminal illness, I really encourage hospice services. And I do it to this day here. I talk about hospice is not just for end of life. It's for palliative care too, to just make someone comfortable. And that's what we all want, right? We just want our loved ones to be comfortable. And it was hard. I mean, the Alzheimer's was hard. Losing her was less hard. So her passing was not as hard as dealing with the everyday of the Alzheimer's, where she just had no joy at the end. Nothing made her happy. She wasn't like miserable. She was never a miserable person. She was always someone that could find the inner strength and the inner joy, but she wasn't joyful like she used to be. Like when she was gardening, you could just see the love and you could just see how happy she was. She didn't have that anymore. When she was cooking, the same. I always said it tasted so good because it was the love she put in it. She just didn't have that anymore. And it was really hard. But I would visit her every day after work. And what I remember most is that we would just have the same 10-minute conversation for an hour. And that was okay. And Alzheimer's residents remember the past more than they remember. It's their short-term memory that goes. But the further back in the past you can go is what they remember. So I would talk about things from my childhood. Oh, Mom, do you remember my 7th birthday? And then we would just start talking about it. And she would. And so we would have the same 10-minute conversation, then we would start it all over again. And I just took joy in that moment. And that's what's important about Alzheimer's, and taking joy in that moment. Funding the Alzheimer's Association, they've made a lot of strides towards that. And I really worry about the future. So it's genetic. So will I end up with that? Will my daughter have to go through that? That's what I worry about. So the future is real, and I see it every day with our residents here. Their families dealing with it, and it's hard. And so I do hope that we keep funding it and that people donate and we have awareness for the disease. And the more people are aware, then hopefully we will find a cure. I think I just encourage people to know that it can affect anyone. Yes, there is a strong genetic belief, but you don't know if you're going to get. My mom was the first one in our family to have it because no one else in her family lived that long. And so as people age, it's going to happen more and more. And we just need to work together to find a cure. And so I ask everyone to please, if you can't physically go to the walk, then donate. $5 even. Give up your Starbucks for the day and donate, and let's find a cure for this. I would say always have hope, always have joy. It can be sad. I'm sad right now, but you have to remember the joyful moments and you have to embrace those. So even if it's just a 2-minute conversation that your mom, if she's suffering from Alzheimer's, came back for that 2 minutes and you had embraced that. I still hold those memories dear. So just cherish each other.